I was 20 years old when my entire understanding of my father shuttered in a single moment. I wasn't ready for it. Nobody ever is. I was at a restaurant, just a normal night out with friends, when I looked across the room and stopped breathing. My father, sitting at a table, a woman beside him, her hand resting gently in his, and two children, a boy and a girl, laughing, looking up at him with complete trust in their eyes. Then one of them said it. "Dad." My chest caved. My fingers went cold. The noise of the entire restaurant disappeared. I called my mother immediately, trembling, barely able to form words. But she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even sound surprised. She just said, quietly, "Don't react. You're only seeing half the truth." And what she told me next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. It started as the most ordinary night. My friends and I had been planning a dinner for days, nothing special, just a small break from the routine. I remember standing in front of the mirror, fixing my hair, choosing what to wear. Everything felt light, easy, normal. When I arrived at the restaurant, my friends were already there, loud, laughing, full of that contagious energy that makes you forget your worries. I joined them, smiled, and for a while, I was completely present. We ordered food, took pictures, made jokes, the kind of night you don't think twice about. But something sat quietly in the back of my mind, a feeling I couldn't name. I told myself I was overthinking. I always do. After a while, I stood up. "I'll be back," I said, just wanting to move, breathe, clear my head. The restaurant was full. Families, couples, people wrapped in their own worlds. I walked slowly, my eyes drifting without purpose, until they stopped, and everything else disappeared. My father, sitting across the room. Same shirt he'd worn earlier that day. No mistake, no confusion. It was him, but he wasn't alone. A woman sat beside him, relaxed, comfortable, her hand resting gently in his. My chest tightened instantly. I didn't move. I couldn't. Then I noticed the children. A boy, maybe 10. A girl, around 7 or 8. They were smiling at him, the way children only smile at someone who makes them feel completely safe. And then I heard it, soft, clear, effortless. "Dad!" My heart dropped straight through the floor. My fingers went cold. My breathing slowed. My body didn't know how to respond because my mind had simply refused to process what my eyes were seeing. I took one slow step back, still staring, still searching for something, anything, that could make this a mistake. There was nothing. He smiled at them, talked to them, leaned in when the woman said something and smiled again. Like this was his life. Like this had always been his life. My hands began to shake. I didn't think. I just moved. Back toward the entrance. Away from that table. Away from whatever I had just witnessed. My heart was pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat. I pulled out my phone and dialed my mother. She picked up after the second ring. "Oh, hello." My voice came out broken, unstable, like it belonged to someone else. "Mom, I just saw Dad." A pause. "What do you mean?" "I'm at a restaurant." I swallowed hard, my throat completely dry. "He's here, and he's not alone." Silence. "There's a woman with him." My voice dropped to almost nothing. "And 2 kids. Mom, they're calling him Dad." I waited for it. The panic, the disbelief, the tears, but they never came. Her voice stayed calm, completely unsettlingly calm. "Listen to me carefully," she said. I froze. "Don't react. Don't go to them. Don't say a single word." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. "Mom, what are you saying? Did you hear what I just told you?" "I'm coming there," she said quietly. And that was it. No gasp. Number? Questions? No shock. Just 3 words and silence. The call ended. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. My mind was spinning. My mother had sounded like she already knew, like she had been waiting for this call. And somehow, that frightened me more than anything I had seen at that table. My eyes drifted back slowly. He was still there, still laughing, still talking, still completely at ease, like a man with absolutely nothing to hide. I thought, how is he just sitting there like that? Because the father I knew, the man I had watched my entire life, he loved my mother. I had seen it in the small things. The way he spoke to her. The way he checked on her without being asked. The quiet, consistent care that doesn't perform itself for anyone. That man was not capable of this. And yet, there he was. Minutes passed. Like ours. I stood near the entrance, invisible, hollowed out, replaying the same images on a loop I couldn't stop. Then, I saw her. My mother walked through the door. Composed, like she wasn't stepping into the middle of something that should have been destroying her. I rushed to her immediately. Mom, she raised her hand gently and caught my arm, stopping me mid-step. Stay here, she said softly. I stared at her. Mom, what are you doing? Did you not hear what I said? I said stay. Her voice was quiet, but it landed like a wall. I stopped, turned slowly, and looked toward that table. Toward him. My heart hammered. This is it, I thought. Now everything explodes. But it didn't. She just looked, no trembling, no shattered expression, no rage building behind her eyes, just calm. And then my father looked up. Their eyes met across the room, and instead of guilt, instead of panic, instead of the freeze of a man caught in his worst secret, he smiled. A small, quiet smile. And my mother smiled back. The air left my lungs completely. He gave a slight nod, like something was understood between them. Without a single word, she nodded back. Like everything was fine. Like everything had already been decided. I couldn't stay silent anymore. I stepped forward, my voice shaking before I even opened my mouth. Mom, what is this? She turned to me, still calm. Let's go home, she said simply. Something snapped inside me. What? My voice rose. No. Mom, are you serious right now? I didn't care that people were starting to look. I didn't care about the noise, the stares, the strangers turning their heads toward us. None of it mattered. Your husband is sitting over there with another woman. My voice cracked. He has a whole other family. Those children are calling him Dad. My chest was heaving now. Tears were already burning at the edges of my eyes. And you're just standing here smiling. Like nothing is wrong. Everything I had held together for the past hour started collapsing at once. The confusion, the fear, the grief of watching someone you completely trusted become a stranger in a single moment. He's been lying to us, I whispered, my voice breaking. For years. Before I could say another word, she grabbed my hand, firm, steady, enough. It wasn't loud, but it stopped me instantly. Something in her tone cut straight through everything. Her grip tightened slightly. Her eyes found mine and held them. Don't you dare say another word about your father like that. I stared at her, chest still rising and falling fast, tears threatening to spill. You are only seeing half the truth. Half the truth. The words didn't make sense. They floated in my mind without landing anywhere. What does that even mean? I whispered. She looked at me, and for the first time that night, I saw something shift behind her eyes. Something deep. Something that had been carrying weight for a long time. Come with me, she said softly. No more questions here. I didn't move right away. I couldn't. My feet felt rooted to that floor, my eyes pulling back toward that table one last time. My father was still sitting there, still calm, still unhurried, like a man who wasn't afraid of being seen. And that was the detail that cut deepest, because it only meant one of two things. Either he had nothing to hide, or everything had already been decided. Long before tonight, my mother gently pulled my hand. I followed. The drive home was the longest silence I have ever sat inside. No music, no words, just the low hum of the road and the sound of my own thoughts tearing themselves apart. I kept replaying it, frame by frame, my father's face, that woman's hand in his, those children laughing, my mother's calm smile, the nod they exchanged like a quiet secret language built over years. None of it fit together, and yet all of it had happened. I sat with my hands in my lap, staring at the window without seeing anything outside it. Every time I tried to form a question, it dissolved before I could speak it. My mother drove without looking at me. The silence wasn't cold. It wasn't angry. It was heavy, like something that had been waiting a long time to finally be put down. When we pulled into the driveway, I stepped out before the car had fully stopped. I couldn't wait anymore. The pressure in my chest had become unbearable, Mom. My voice came out thin, desperate. Please, tell me what is going on. She stepped out slowly, picked up her bag, walked inside without rushing, and then she turned around. Sit down, she said softly. I don't want to sit. My voice cracked again. I want answers. She looked at me quietly for a long moment. Then she sat down herself. And the way she exhaled, slow, deliberate, like someone finally setting down something they had carried alone for far too long, told me everything that came next was going to change me completely. This, she said, started years ago. Your father had a best friend, she began. Her voice was calm, measured, like she had rehearsed this moment, or maybe just survived it so many times in her own mind that the words had finally worn smooth. They were like brothers, not just close friends, brothers. The kind of trust that doesn't need explaining. The kind that just exists. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just stood there, arms wrapped around myself, listening. Then one day, everything changed. She paused, her eyes lowered slightly. He got sick. The room felt quieter suddenly. Like even the air had stopped moving. At first, they thought it was treatable, something manageable, but it wasn't. As the months passed, his condition got worse. Hospital visits became routine. Pain became constant, and slowly he began to understand that he wasn't going to make it. My breathing had slowed completely without me realizing it. One day, he asked your father to come alone. No one else. Just him. She looked up at me. And he made him promise. Something. I swallowed hard. He said, after I'm gone, take care of my wife. Take care of my children. Her voice grew heavier with each word. He wasn't just asking. He was begging. Crying. Your father told me he had never seen him like that before, a grown man, completely broken, holding his hand and weeping. My chest tightened slowly, quietly, like a fist closing around my heart. He said there was no one else, no family nearby, no support system, nothing. And he looked your father in the eyes and said, if you don't stand with them, they will be destroyed. The silence that followed that sentence was enormous. I felt something shift inside me, not dramatically, not all at once, just a quiet, slow turning, like a key in a lock that had been stuck for a long time. Your father couldn't say no, she continued softly. Not in that room, not to that man, not in that moment, she exhaled. So, he promised. In the beginning, she continued, it was only practical help. Money for rent, food, school fees for the children. He visited occasionally just to check that they were okay. That was all it was meant to be. She paused, and her expression changed slightly. Something quieter moved through it. But then, his friend died. The words landed simply. No decoration, no drama, just the plain, brutal weight of them. And after that, the world started watching. Her tone shifted. Something bitter and tired crept into it. A young woman, alone, a man visiting regularly. That's all people needed. She shook her head slowly. Whispers started. Then accusations. Stories that had nothing to do with the truth. They questioned your father's character. They questioned her dignity. They laughed. They judged. They built an entire narrative out of nothing, and they believed it completely. My hands had tightened without me noticing. And that woman, my mother said softly, was already broken. She had just lost her husband. She was raising 2 children alone. She had nothing left, and the world was taking even that. She paused, her voice dropping further. One day she told your father, "Please stop coming here. The world is not kind. They are destroying whatever little respect I have left. I don't want help that costs me my dignity." I felt the weight of that sentence settle over the entire room. "And that's when your father realized something," my mother said quietly. She looked at me directly now. Money wasn't enough. He could provide for them, but he couldn't protect them. Not from the world. Not from what people were saying. She took a slow breath. "So he made a decision." I already knew. Before she said it, I already knew. He married her. The words were simple, calm, final. Not out of desire, not out of betrayal, but to give her a name. To give those children protection. To shut the world up, because the world only stops talking when there's nothing left to question. Everything that had been fractured inside me for the past several hours began slowly, painfully, beautifully, to realign. He didn't just give them support, she added quietly. He gave them a shield. Then she looked at me with tired, honest eyes. And after he made that decision, he came home, and he told me everything. I stared at her. "What did you do?" I whispered. She gave a faint smile, the kind that carries old pain behind it. "I didn't accept it right away," she said honestly. "I was angry. I was hurt. I felt the ground disappear beneath me." She paused. "But then I went to see them. I saw that woman. I saw those children. I looked into their eyes, and I saw fear. I saw a future that had been taken from them before it even started." Her voice was barely above a whisper now. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't betrayal. She looked at me with complete steadiness. This was someone's last hope. The room was completely still. I stood there, not moving, not speaking, just breathing, slowly processing every word she had just given me, turning each piece over carefully, watching the picture change completely from what I thought I had seen just hours ago. "So you knew," I said finally. "This whole time?" She nodded gently. "We kept it from you," she said. "Not to deceive you, but because your father tried to tell you many times. He would get close, find the moment, open his mouth, and then stop." "Why?" My voice came out softer than I expected. "Because he was afraid," she said simply. "Afraid that you would look at him differently. Afraid that everything he was in your eyes, every memory, every moment would collapse. Afraid of losing you." That hit somewhere I wasn't prepared for. I thought about every time my father had gone quiet at the dinner table. Every time he had looked at me a second too long before changing the subject. Every time I had caught something unreadable passing across his face and dismissed it as tiredness or distraction. It wasn't tiredness. It was the weight of a promise he didn't know how to explain to his own child. "He chose to protect everyone," my mother said quietly. "That woman, her children, our family, you. He carried all of it alone because he didn't want anyone to break under the weight of it." Tears were falling now. "I wasn't even trying to stop them." "That's why you smiled at him," I whispered. "At the restaurant. That's why you nodded." She smiled softly. "Because I wasn't seeing a stranger," she said. "I was seeing my husband doing exactly what I have always known him to do, quietly, without applause, without anyone needing to know." I wiped my face with the back of my hand, but the tears kept coming, and then the door opened. I turned. My father walked in first, steady, calm, his eyes finding mine immediately, the way they always did, the way they had my entire life. Like I was the first thing he looked for in every room. Behind him, the woman, and the 2 children, no hiding, no hesitation, no performance, just people, just truth, just a promise walking through a door. Everything felt different this time. The confusion was gone. The fear was gone. What remained was something quieter and far more honest. My father looked at me. His eyes were calm, but behind them, I could see it. Years of carrying something heavy. Years of hoping this moment would come, and terrifying himself with the thought that it might destroy everything. They know everything now, my mother said softly from behind me. He held my gaze. Didn't speak. Didn't try to explain or defend or fill the silence with words that weren't needed. He just waited. And I understood in that moment that this was the most vulnerable I had ever seen him. Not weak, not broken. Vulnerable in the way that only the bravest people allow themselves to be. Standing completely open, waiting to be seen for exactly who he was. I stood up, my legs felt unsteady. My chest was full of something I didn't have a name for. Grief and pride and love and relief. All tangled together into something that could only come out one way. I walked toward him, and I hugged him. Tightly, the way you hold someone when you realize you almost lost them. Not to distance or death, but to misunderstanding. To half a truth seen in the wrong light. His arms wrapped around me instantly, and I felt it, the exhale. The release. Years of quiet fear leaving his body in a single breath. "You're the best father in the world," I whispered into his shoulder. His grip tightened. No words. He didn't need any. After that night, everything shifted, not overnight, not dramatically, but steadily, honestly, the way real things change. We stopped being two separate worlds, existing in carefully maintained silence. We became one. The house that had always felt complete began to feel alive, filled with noise and laughter and the beautiful chaos of children who no longer carried fear in their eyes. We shared meals around one table. We went out together. We sat in the same spaces and breathed the same air, and slowly, without forcing it, we became family. The boy laughed freely now. The girl had stopped looking over her shoulder. That woman who had carried so much for so long finally looked like someone who was allowed to rest. My father looked peaceful, truly peaceful. The kind that only comes when you are no longer hiding any part of yourself from the people you love. And my mother, that same quiet smile she had worn all evening at the restaurant. I finally understood it completely. It wasn't denial. It wasn't performance. It was the smile of a woman who had already chosen love over pride, truth over comfort, and family over the narrow definitions the world tries to impose on it. I used to think I knew my father. I thought I understood who he was, the version of him I could see, the parts he let me hold. But that night taught me something I will carry for the rest of my life. The people who love us most are often carrying the heaviest things in the quietest ways. Not because they want to deceive us, but because they are trying desperately, imperfectly, completely to protect us from weight they chose to bear alone. What I saw at that restaurant was not betrayal. It was a promise that refused to break. A man who looked his dying friend in the eyes and said, "I will not let your family fall." And then spent years making sure he kept his word, even when it cost him everything. Even when no one knew. Even when the person he most wanted to understand him almost didn't. I am 20 years old, and I have the best father in the world. Not because he was perfect, but because when it mattered most, he chose to be good. And that is the whole truth.